In the glittering world of celebrity, we're trained to look only where the spotlights fall, at the red carpets, the diamond watches, the mansions with guarded gates. We rarely stare long enough into the shadows behind those lights, where the stories turn darker, heavier, and far more human. Some of the most powerful black stars in music and hip-hop once woke up today worth tens of thousands of dollars, their names printed in gold on contracts and billboards. They commanded stages, reshaped culture, and moved money like small nations. Yet behind their staged smiles and chart-topping hits, there were choices being made, reckless, violent, or desperate, that would eventually drag them from penthouses to prison cells. Today we open the files on 11 black celebrities whose trajectories bent from the highest peaks of fame to the cold reality of incarceration. Men who once walked into studios as kings now count time in concrete blocks, their legends rewritten by police reports, court transcripts, and metal doors that slam shut every night. These are not tales of superstardom. They are postscripts of power-abused impulses, unleashed, and fortunes that couldn't buy a way out of consequences. Suge Knight, the fall of a music empire and a man buried alive in time. For a long stretch of the 1990s, Marion Suge Knight was more than just a music executive. He was the storm at the center of West Coast hip-hop. As the driving force behind Death Row Records, Knight helped turn names like Tupac Shakur, Dr. Dre, and Snoop Dogg into global icons. Death Row wasn't just a label, it was an empire that reportedly moved around $750 million in record sales and deals, a factory of hits, cash, and fear. Knight carried himself like a warlord in a tailored suit. Where other executives signed contracts in back offices, he signed them surrounded by bodyguards, rumors, and an aura that made people lower their voices when they spoke his name. Death Row's success poured millions into his world luxury cars, sprawling parties, a reputation that seemed too big to ever crumble. But power has a way of feeding its own worst impulses. And on January 29, 2015, those impulses finally collided with reality. That day, Knight showed up near the production of Straight Outta Compton, a film revisiting the origins of N.W.A. Witnesses said tension was already thick in the air when he became embroiled in a heated confrontation in a parking lot. Moments later, in a move that stunned even those used to his volatility, Knight climbed into his truck, hit the gas, and drove directly into two men, Terry Carter and Cleabone Sloan. The impact was brutal. Terry Carter, a well-known businessman and longtime associate, was left dying on the asphalt. Clee Sloan survived, but with serious injuries. The security cameras that captured parts of the incident stripped away any illusions. The man who had ruled a music dynasty was now at the center of a homicide investigation. In court, Knight ultimately entered a no-contest plea to voluntary manslaughter, a legal stance that does not admit guilt, but does not claim innocence either. It was a strategic move, an attempt to avoid an even harsher outcome under California's unforgiving three-strikes law. The judge handed down a 28-year sentence, 22 years for manslaughter, with an additional 6 years added for his status as a repeat offender. The decision slammed the door on more than just his freedom. It sealed the fate of a career that had once seemed indestructible. By the time he entered state prison in 2018, the transformation was stark. The once imposing figure who had towered over the rap game now moved through a high-security facility controlled by guards and schedules, not by fear or loyalty. His health deteriorated, worn down by age, stress, and confinement. The phone became his last stage, rare interviews conducted through static-filled lines, his voice echoing down cement corridors instead of studio booths. Outside the walls, the name Death Row Records lived on in documentaries, nostalgia, and headlines. But the man who built it faced a much colder reality. The yachts, the parties, the multi-million-dollar contracts, they all faded into distant memory, replaced by institutional meals, controlled movements, and long silent nights. With his sentence structured the way it is, Suge Knight is not eligible for parole until well into the 2030s. By then, even if he walks out, the world he once dominated will be almost unrecognizable. The new generation of artists knows his name from history, not from personal encounters. The empire he crafted has long since slipped from his hands. Suge Knight's story is what happens when a man confuses fear for respect and power for immunity. At one time he stood atop a music dynasty that shaped an era. Now he sits at the bottom of a system he cannot control, another inmate, in a numbered uniform, staring down years that no amount of money can buy back. Kid Creole, from hip-hop pioneer to inmate with a fading heartbeat. Before the mugshot and the prison ID number, Nathaniel Glover Jr. was Kid Creole, one of the men who helped invent the language of hip-hop. As a core member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, he was there when block parties and park jams in the Bronx started to echo around the world. Tracks like The Message didn't just climb charts, they carried street reality into living rooms that had never set foot in New York. That early success brought more than applause. By the early 2000s, between recording royalties, European tours, and festival appearances, Kid Creole had reportedly earned between $200 and $300 from the music he helped build. In 2007, the group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, cementing their legacy. On paper, it looked like the kind of story that should end in honor and soft landings. But fame in hip-hop doesn't always come with stability. As newer generations took over, his profile dimmed. Unlike some of his bandmates, Kid Creole's solo career never exploded. Through the 2000s, he was said to be living quietly, security jobs, odd work, small musical projects that never broke through. The man who once toured the world became another face in a crowd of working men trying to hold on. Then came the night that erased everything. On August 1, 2017, under the dirty glow of Manhattan streetlights, Kid Creole crossed paths with a homeless man named John Jolly. What might have been just an awkward sidewalk encounter turned suddenly tense. In a moment of fear, anger, or both, Glover pulled a knife. Within seconds, he stabbed Jolly wounds that would prove fatal not long after. Police arrested him the next day. In custody, he claimed he believed Jolly was about to attack him and insisted he acted in self-defense. But in the courtroom, that argument was dissected down to every gesture, every step, every angle. The prosecutor painted a different picture, that of a man who reacted with deadly excess. The judge and jury agreed. Kid Creole was convicted of manslaughter. Since 2022, he has been serving a 16-year sentence in the New York prison system, including time in notoriously harsh environments like those that have long been criticized for overcrowding and inmate violence. Because of his age, he has reportedly been placed in calmer sections away from the most aggressive populations, but the word calm is relative in a world of bars and concrete. His contact with the outside is now limited to calls, occasional letters, and the memories he carries of a different life. The stage, the crowds, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame plaque, these are ghosts that visit between counts and lights out. Years of confinement, stress, and an aging body have taken a toll. Whether his health will outlast his sentence is a question none of his former fans can answer. The empire he helped build, the foundations of recorded hip-hop, itself lives on in playlists and documentaries. But the man at the center of this file sits behind a steel door, the gap between who he was and where he is now widening with every passing year. R. Kelly, the R&B king, locked away with the weight of his own history. For decades, Robert Sylvester Kelly R. Kelly was more than just popular. He was the soundtrack to graduations, weddings, quiet nights, and stadium-sized sing-alongs. With over 75 million records sold, worldwide hits like I Believe I Can Fly and the sprawling R. album from 1998 made him one of the most commercially successful R&B artists in history. He wrote for himself and some of the biggest names alive, including Ali and Michael Jackson. The money followed the music. Tours, production credits, songwriting, and long-running projects like Trapped in the Closet reportedly pushed his fortune close to the $100 million mark. To the public, he was a genius who could pull an anthem out of thin air. Behind that image, however, whispers had been circulating for years, stories about young girls' coercion and situations that didn't look like love when the lights were turned all the way on. Those whispers eventually solidified into accusations, then investigations, then charges. By the 2010s, multiple allegations of sexual abuse, exploitation of minors, and human trafficking had piled up. On June 27, 2022, in a New York courtroom, the reckoning finally arrived. R. Kelly was convicted on a sweeping set of federal charges, including racketeering tied to the exploitation of young women and girls, as well as the production of pornographic material involving minors. The sentence, 30 years. A separate federal case in Chicago brought additional convictions, adding 20 more years. Most of those years would run at the same time as the New York sentence, but one extra year was ordered to be served consecutively. On the books, this left him facing roughly 31 years behind bars, a timeline that all but guarantees he will spend the bulk of his remaining life inside the federal system. The fall was swift and unforgiving. Record labels backed away. Projects were shelved. Streaming platforms faced pressure to mute his catalog. Assets were seized. Civil lawsuits from alleged victims mounted. The man who once earned millions a year had his income reduced to cents on the dollar, with what remained swallowed up by legal fees and restitution. R. Kelly is currently held in a medium-security federal facility in Butner, North Carolina, separated from most of the general population. For safety reasons, his movements are more controlled than the average inmates. Contact with the outside world is limited to monitored phone calls, carefully screened mail, and the occasional legal visit. The wide world he once toured is narrowed now to cells, corridors, and fenced yards. Even behind bars, he has tried to cling to music. In 2022, an album titled I Admit It briefly appeared online, reportedly recorded before his incarceration, but released while he was already in custody. It was quickly pulled after his label refused any official association. The attempt only underscored how thoroughly his career has been sealed off. Reports from inside describe a man whose health has declined under the combined pressure of confinement age and constant legal battles. Whatever he was on stage, showman, genius, idol in prison, he is just one more inmate, walking the slow circle of yard time, carrying crimes and controversies that will follow his name long after the last note of his music fades. See murder, a life sentence in Angola, and a career frozen in time. Corey Miller, better known as C. Murder, emerged in the late 1990s as a corps soldier in the No Limit Records army built by his older brother Master P. While the gold and platinum tanks on the album covers were almost cartoonish, the numbers were not. Records like Life or Death and Bossellini sold in the hundreds of thousands, if not more, and helped engrave No Limit's skull and tank logo into hip-hop history. C. Murder's gravelly voice and uncompromising street narratives made him a standout, even in a crowded roster. Between album sales tours and collaborations, including work with figures like Snoop Dogg, his net worth in the early 2000s was estimated around the $1 million mark, with the potential to climb far higher if the run continued. Instead, his life veered into the darkest chapter a rapper can live outside of a coffin. On January 11, 2002, a nightclub in Harvey, Louisiana, descended into chaos. A fight broke out. In the confusion, a gun was fired. 16-year-old Stephen Thomas fell fatally wounded. Among the crowd that night was C. Murder. Witnesses, some scared, some conflicted, put him at the heart of the violence. He was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. From the very beginning, Miller insisted he was innocent. The case that followed would be marred, according to many observers, by shaky witness accounts, retracted statements, and claims of pressure behind the scenes. Still, when the verdict came in, it was devastating: guilty, second-degree murder. The sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Appeals and legal challenges over the years have failed to free him from that outcome. The man who once co-ruled stages with Master P now lives inside one of the most feared prisons in America, the Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola. Built on former plantation land, Angola has a grim reputation, overcrowding, hard labor violence, and a culture where broken spirits are more common than hope. Reports describe C. Murder spending much of his time in a high-security unit confined to a small cell, where each day must be managed hour by hour. The constant hum of the prison, the clanging doors, shouted orders, distant shouts, has replaced the roar of concert crowds. His physical health has reportedly suffered, worn down by stress age and the harsh environment. Mentally, the strain of a life without parole sentence is its own ongoing punishment. Yet he has refused to let his voice die. Using phone calls and tightly monitored communications, he continues to write and record verses that are then pieced together into songs for release on the outside. The audio quality is rough, the process slow, but for loyal fans, each track is proof that the man they once followed is still alive, still creating, still resisting total silence. Inside Angola, he participates in rehabilitation and skills programs where possible, learning trades and trying to carve out some sliver of purpose in a place designed to erase it. Outside, his family, including Master P and a devoted fan base, continue to argue that his conviction was flawed. They hold on to the hope that new evidence or a legal shift might one day open a door that now looks welded shut. Realistically, the odds are steep. A life sentence at Angola rarely dissolves into freedom. The stage he once owned has frozen in time, his career preserved in old videos and playlists, while the man himself walks the yard under a burning Louisiana sun, serving a sentence that has no scheduled end. Big Lurch, the horror story that turned a rising rapper into a permanent monster. Before his name was whispered like a warning, Antron Singleton, known in rap circles as Big Lurch, was just another hungry West Coast MC trying to claw his way up from the underground. He had a looming physical presence, a deep, menacing voice, and a style that fit neatly into Los Angeles' gritty late 90s sound. With the group Cosmic Slopshop and on solo tracks, he began to build a small but loyal following, moving through clubs, mixtapes, and regional shows. According to industry chatter at the time, his talent had him on the verge of something bigger: independent deals, touring money, and a steady income that pushed his net worth toward the mid-six figures. He wasn't a mainstream star yet, but insiders believed he had room to grow, a future built on louder stages, better features, and more exposure. Instead, what came next made his name unforgettable for a far darker reason. On April 10, 2002, in a Los Angeles apartment, a nightmare unfolded that sounded less like a police report and more like a horror film script. Under the influence of PCP, a drug known for dragging the mind into chaos, Big Lurch attacked his roommate, Tynesha Ices. The violence was frenzied, brutal, and according to the prosecution's narrative, unspeakably grotesque. When authorities arrived, the scene stunned even seasoned officers. Ices lay dead from multiple stab wounds. Reports from the case alleged that parts of her body had been mutilated and partially consumed. The forensic details would follow him into court, and beyond branding him not only as a killer, but as something closer to a monster in the eyes of the public. Lurch's defense argued that he was not in control, that PCP had torn away his ability to understand or restrain his actions. They pushed for an insanity defense, claiming that no sane person could have committed such acts. The court, however, rejected that claim. The jury heard the evidence, saw the photos, and delivered a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, torture, and aggravated mayhem. The sentence was inevitable and absolute: 2 consecutive life terms. No parole. No second chance. Today, Big Lurch lives inside Kern Valley State Prison, one of California's most unforgiving institutions. Inmates and staff alike know his case. According to prison accounts, many keep their distance, repulsed or frightened by what they've heard. He spends large portions of his time in isolation, cut off from most group activities, effectively entombed within the system. The man who once stood on stage with a microphone now stands alone in a cell, his past reduced to a handful of underground tracks, and a crime story that eclipsed everything else. Whatever promise his career once held is gone, replaced by a permanent association with a single horrific night. For Big Lurch, there is no after to this story, only an endless present of concrete walls and a reputation that will never be washed clean. Max B, the wavy cult hero, writing hooks through prison phone lines. Charlie Wingate, better known as Max B, didn't need a mainstream chart topper to change rap. His voice, lazy, melodic, raw, turned hooks into waves, before wavy became a catchphrase. In the mid-2000s, his mixtapes like $1 Million Baby and the Public Domain series floated across New York and the internet, reshaping how street rap could sound. Attached to the Dipset orbit, collaborating with Jim Jones, appearing on records with French Montana, Max B became a legend in the making. His blend of sing-song, crooning, and grimy storytelling made him a cult favorite. According to reports, record deals, show money, and side hustles brought him a yearly income in the low six figures, enough for a comfortable, fast-paced life in and around the city he repped. Then one decision shattered it all. On September 22, 2006, Max B became entangled in an armed robbery plot at a Holiday Inn in Fort Lee, New Jersey. According to the prosecution, he orchestrated a plan to have associates rob a man rumored to be holding a large amount of cash. The robbery went catastrophically wrong. A struggle broke out and shots were fired. One man was left dead. Max B wasn't the shooter, but the state argued that he was the architect. In their eyes, his voice planned the crime, even if his finger never touched the trigger. When the case finally went to trial, the weight of conspiracy charges came down hard. He was convicted of felony murder, armed robbery, and related offenses. The sentence stunned even those hardened by the system, 75 years. For many, it looked less like punishment and more like a burial. Appeals followed. Legal work chipped away at the original decision. Years later, a plea agreement reportedly reduced his sentence to a 20-year term, offering a faint line of light at the end of a very long tunnel. Even so, for a man whose sound once dominated mixtapes, the time away from free life has been punishing. Today, Max B is housed in East Jersey State Prison. But unlike many who vanish into the system, he's refused to disappear quietly. Using prison phones as makeshift recording booths, he has continued to write and rap his verses captured in grainy, low-fidelity audio that producers on the outside turn into songs. Projects like House Money emerged, not from studio sessions but from collect calls and compressed voice notes. The hip-hop community has not forgotten him. French Montana and others keep his name alive, referencing him in songs, interviews, and social media. Younger fans discover him retroactively and join the Free Max B chorus that has become its own cultural slogan. Inside, he moves through rehab programs, learns trades, and works, trying to keep both body and mind intact as the years roll by. With sentence reductions and legal adjustments, talk of a possible release around the mid-2020 essays circulated. Whether the industry that once embraced him will still have a place ready is another question. The sound he helped pioneer has been imitated, remixed, and globalized while he's been locked away. Max B's legend lives in the tension between two realities: the man whose wave influenced a generation, and the inmate piecing together songs from behind bars, hoping the world will still be listening when the gates finally open. Tory Lanez, a decade in a cage for a few seconds of gunfire. Daystar Peterson Tory Lanez was built for the modern music landscape. Singer, rapper, writer, performer, he blurred every line he touched. The Chixtape series flipped nostalgia into streaming gold. Albums like I Told You and Daystar cemented his status as a versatile star who could stand next to anyone on a track. Money followed quickly. According to reports, by the late 2010s and early 2020s, Tory's net worth had climbed into the multi-million-dollar range, around $6 million built from touring, streaming, publishing, and brand deals. His lifestyle mirrored that success. luxury cars, high-profile parties, and a constant orbit around other stars. Then came one night in Los Angeles that detonated everything. On July 12, 2020, after a party in the Hollywood Hills, an argument erupted inside a vehicle carrying Tory Lanez, Megan Thee Stallion, and others. The dispute spilled out onto the street. In the confusion that followed, shots were fired. Megan was hit in the feet, injured but alive. The story didn't stay in police files. It exploded across social media, entertainment news, and fan circles. Speculation, accusations, denials all played out in public. Tory Lanez insisted he was innocent, releasing music that hinted at conspiracies and misunderstandings. Megan stated plainly that he shot her. The case went to trial in 2022 and 2023. Evidence was laid out. Eyewitness accounts, forensic analysis, and texts were dissected. By the time the jury returned, the verdict was clear: guilty of assault with a semi-automatic firearm, unlawful possession of a loaded unregistered firearm, and negligent discharge causing injury. The judge's sentence was a heavy one: 10 years in state prison. Now held at California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, Tory Lanez lives inside a very different system of bars and gates. The man once cheered by crowds now wakes up to roll calls and correctional routines. According to reports, he has faced serious danger inside. In May 2025, he was said to have survived a stabbing incident, suffering multiple wounds, a stark reminder that celebrity offers no shield in prison, only a target on the back. Even there, he continues to cling to music. Through monitored phone calls and limited communication, he's reportedly worked on rough projects, street-level tapes, and raw recordings that fans pass around online. It's a far cry from world tours and expensive studios. But for him, it may be the last thread tying him to the career he once ruled. Outside, the damage is extensive. Major contracts are gone. Collaborations vanished. His name, once attached to chart success, is now permanently linked to violence against a fellow artist. The hip-hop community is deeply divided. Some fans stay loyal, others turn away in disgust. Brands, labels, and promoters see risk, not opportunity. Even with the possibility of sentence reductions or good behavior credits, a decade lost in an industry that moves at high speed is almost a lifetime. When he emerges, if he does, he will face a world where the music has changed, the culture has moved on, and his own name carries a stain that can't be remixed away. Tory Lanez's fall was not the result of a long criminal career, but of one night, one argument, and a gun fired in anger. The cost of those seconds is measured now in years spent behind steel doors replaying a decision that shattered a multi-million-dollar future and left a permanent scar on another artist's life. Young Thug, a rap architect learning how small a cell really is. For years, Jeffrey Lamar Williams' Young Thug moved through hip-hop like a living glitch in the system. His voice bent in strange angles. His fashion rewrote the dress code. His label, Young Stoner Life, YSL turned Prot GS like Gunna, and according to reports, even future stars like Lil Baby, into forces of their own. Albums such as So Much Fun and Punk climbed charts, racked up millions of streams, and made him a central figure in modern rap's evolution. Behind the eccentric style, the numbers were straightforward. Through touring, streaming, real estate ventures, and fashion collaborations, Young Thug's fortune was estimated around $10 million. He wasn't just a rapper, he was believed to be a brand, a business, an engine pulling an entire crew forward. Then one day the door slammed. On a May morning that sent shockwaves through the industry, law enforcement arrived with a sweeping indictment. According to prosecutors, Young Thug and YSL were not just a label and creative collective, but part of a racketeering enterprise tied to violence and drugs. The charges stacked in a Georgia courtroom came with a maximum sentence, measured not in years but in decades. The case dragged on, every hearing dissected in public. Inside, legal teams weighed options. Outside, fans argued over whether YSL was a family of artists or something much darker. In the end, facing the risk of a 40-year hammer, Young Thug accepted a plea deal. According to court records, he pled guilty and took a 5-year sentence followed by a crushing 15 years of probation, an invisible leash that will follow him long after he steps outside the gate. Now held in a Georgia state prison, the man, once surrounded by security stylists and studio engineers, wakes up to a stripped-down world, a narrow bed, a concrete floor, a door that opens and closes on someone else's schedule. Reports from inside describe conditions as brutal, overcrowding, tension, sudden fights. In that environment, his fame is a double-edged sword, earning both admiration and unwanted attention. Even here he clings to the only constant he's ever trusted: music. Through phone calls and letters, he continues to write, sending fragments of lyrics and ideas to the outside. According to those close to him, he participates in rehabilitation programs, learning trades and trying to keep his mind from rusting. On paper, he still has a chance to return to a career. In reality, 5 years in prison and 15 under supervision is a lifetime in an industry that turns over stars every season. He has lost major collaboration offers, delayed projects, and a portion of his influence in a game that rarely pauses for anyone. Public opinion is deeply divided. Some see him as a victim of overreach, others as a symbol of how far street ties can drag down a king. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. The man who once floated above the rap world now presses his back against a prison wall, measuring time in days instead of streams, and learning just how small a cell feels when you've already seen the world. Pooh Shiesty, a young hitmaker, counting the days until 2026. Lontrell Williams Jr., known to fans as Pooh Shiesty, exploded into the spotlight like a bullet leaving the chamber. His breakout single, Back in Blood, spread through clubs' feeds and car speakers with a violent urgency that matched his lyrics. His debut project, Shiesty Season, turned him into one of Gucci Mane's brightest 2017 signees and a face of new generation street rap. According to industry estimates, between streaming checks, touring, and label advances, Pooh Shiesty built a fortune in the low millions, roughly $5 million at his peak. He went from local talent to national name in what felt like a single season. But the same intensity that defined his music would, according to court documents, pull him straight into the justice system. On October 7, 2020, at a hotel in Florida, what was supposed to be a drug and cash exchange turned violent. An armed confrontation erupted, shots were fired, and at least one person was left wounded. Prosecutors later alleged that Pooh Shiesty had arrived with the intent to rob, not to merely transact. The security footage and evidence built a case that he had been part of an armed robbery gone wrong. Arrested and indicted on federal firearm and conspiracy charges, he found himself facing a possible sentence far longer than his career had even existed. Seeking to limit the damage, he pled guilty to a reduced count. In 2022, the court handed down a 5-year sentence. For a man barely into his 20s, it was both a heavy blow and a narrow escape from something much worse. He is now housed at FCI Miami, a medium-security federal facility. Compared to the country's most notorious prisons, its conditions are considered less extreme, but for someone who once commanded stages and VIP rooms, the adjustment is still brutal. Each day is now structured around counts, meal calls, and limited movement. According to reports, Pooh Shiesty spends his time in rehabilitation programs, learning trades, and working in assignments like the kitchen or maintenance. Early mornings are reserved for the yard where he runs and exercises, trying to keep his body and mind from softening. The chaos of the outside world has been swapped for a quieter, more dangerous kind of monotony. Music, however, has not left him. He writes verses in his bunk, memorizes them, and sends lines out through carefully rationed phone calls. Snippets of his voice still leak into the world, brief updates, fragments of songs, reminders that he hasn't completely vanished. Loyal fans share these pieces, waiting for the day the gate opens. If he earns good time, he could walk out around 2026. But even if the dates work in his favor, the industry may not. His legal record hangs over every potential deal, and labels that once courted him are now cautious. His name still rings in certain circles, but his window to capitalize on his early momentum grows smaller with every day behind bars. For now, Pooh Shiesty remains a symbol of a particular kind of rise and fall, a young artist who turned authenticity into success, then watched it turn into evidence in a courtroom. Tay K, the runaway rapper, frozen in mugshot time. Tamor McIntyre's stage name Tay K didn't just make a hit, he made a soundtrack to his own manhunt. In 2017, his song The Race went viral, not just because of its raw hook and urgent beat, but because of what it represented. According to prosecutors and news accounts, he recorded and released it while on the run from authorities, essentially turning his fugitive status into marketing. Before his arrest, Tay K's sudden fame translated into real money. Estimates suggested he was pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, roughly $200 to $300, from streaming shows and short-term label deals, remarkable numbers for a teenager barely out of high school. He spoke for a generation that saw chaos all around them and decided to rap it exactly as it was. But the case behind the music was far from a harmless story. On July 23, 2016, in Mansfield, Texas, Tay K and several accomplices were involved in a planned armed robbery. The target was a house believed to hold cash and drugs. Instead, the plan spiraled into violence. In the chaos that followed, 21-year-old Ethan Walker was shot and killed. When charges came down, Tay K didn't wait. He cut off his ankle monitor and fled, leaving behind a trail that would soon become part of his mythology. The Race, released while he was on the run, detailed his mindset with chilling bluntness. It climbed charts and racked up millions of streams. But for prosecutors, it also became a kind of confession wrapped in melody. He was captured on June 30, 2017. The trial that followed stripped away the online persona and focused on the facts, planning, participation, and the fatal outcome. In 2019, Tay K was convicted of murder and related charges. The sentence was staggering 55 years in prison. Under Texas law, he will not even be eligible for parole until he has served roughly half that time, about 27.5 years. He is currently held at the William P. Clemens Unit and associated high-security environments within the Texas system, according to media reports, where violence between inmates is a constant threat. Incidents and fights have led to periods of solitary confinement, leaving him alone in a small cell for up to 23 hours a day. Interaction is minimal. The outside world tour buses, studios, flashing cameras is now a memory stitched together from old interviews and music videos. Campaigns like Free Take circulate on social media, fueled by younger fans who discovered him after his incarceration. They share clips, old songs, and speculative posts about appeals and resentencing. But the paper reality is harsh. A 55-year term is not easily undone. By the time Tay K faces a parole board, he will be a middle-aged man emerging into a hip-hop landscape that may barely remember the summer when the Race shook the internet. For now, he is a cautionary tale, frozen at the age of his mugshot, a kid who turned his fugitive status into a hit and paid for it with the rest of his youth. Kodak Black, a repeat descent into the same revolving door. Bill Kahan Capri, better known as Kodak Black, rose from Florida projects into global playlists with a sound that was as unpolished as it was unmistakable. Hits like Tunnel Vision and Z-E-Z-E pushed him from local sensation to certified star, while albums such as Painting Pictures and Cutthroat Bill Vol. One secured his place in rap's current era. By 2023, according to financial estimates, Kodak's net worth hovered around $8 million, built from a steady stream of hit records, international tours, fashion ventures, and real estate investments. To many, he looked like someone who had finally outrun his past. But the past has a way of changing shape and waiting at the next corner. On May 6, 2019, Kodak was arrested for falsifying information on federal firearm purchase forms. Prosecutors alleged that he lied about his legal status to acquire multiple weapons. He received a sentence of nearly 4 years in federal prison time that could easily have derailed his career permanently. Then something almost no one predicted happened in early 2021. He was granted a pardon by President Donald Trump, effectively cutting that sentence short and opening the door for a rapid return to music. For a moment it looked like the reset might hold. Kodak released new work, performed, and appeared to be rebuilding his trajectory. But on December 7, 2023, he was arrested again, this time in Florida, after police reportedly found cocaine in his vehicle, a serious problem for someone already under supervision. The charges included drug possession and violation of probation. In court, he chose to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced punishment. The result, a 3-year sentence in federal custody. It was a shorter term than many expected, but a devastating echo of that same old pattern: freedom, success, self-destruction, and return to a cell. He was sent back to FCI Miami, a medium-security prison he now shares, according to reports, with other high-profile inmates like Pooh Shiesty. The difference this time is the weight of repetition. He knows the routines, the work assignments in cleaning or administrative support, the lines for meals, the calls home scheduled by someone else's clock. Despite everything, Kodak Black has not given up on music. He writes lyrics in his bunk, recites verses over static-filled phone lines, and sends fragments of songs to contacts on the outside. Short clips and written messages filter back to fans, keeping his connection to the culture alive, even as his physical body is locked away. On paper, a 3-year sentence means a likely release around 2026, assuming no additional violations. In practice, every return to prison chips away at his opportunities. Labels may still be interested in the numbers he can generate, but brands, partners, and parts of the public see instability and risk. His image has been dented, mended, and dented again. His story, at least for now, is a cycle that refuses to break. A gifted artist, repeatedly pulled back into the same revolving door, each spin leaving him a little more bruised, a little further from the life he could have fully claimed. These men once held futures lined with platinum records, awards, and endless tours. They shaped soundtracks for millions, turned their names into brands, and stacked fortunes they were told would last forever. Yet a single decision, a fight, a gun, a robbery, a knife, a lie on a form, was enough to flip the script from superstardom to incarceration. Today, they sleep beneath fluorescent lights instead of chandeliers, their days measured not in ticket sales, but in head counts. Wealth, it turns out, can buy lawyers comfort and time, but it cannot erase consequences. Some still write, still plot comebacks, still dream of a second act, waiting outside the fences. Others are serving sentences so long that freedom has become a distant abstraction. Whether any of them will truly find light again, or whether their stories will stand as permanent warnings carved into hip-hop, history is a question only the years ahead can answer. If you know someone whose life or personality mirrors this story, share their name in the comments. We'd like to explore their journey as well.